So just by a show of hands, how many of you are involved with finding a shidduch for your children right now? We're all... What? Finished. You're looking for a shidduch. Okay. So, it's a... But you're never finished.
Why?
Because you got grandchildren to worry about, eventually.
And I made one shidduch.
And then you got your friends' children to worry about also.
You're right. True. I made one shidduch. He was the wedding last week. Dinner.
Oh, mazel tov.
So I made Alan and Deborah shidduch. Parents.
Wow. Good for you. Okay. My observation is very simple, and I've mentioned this from the Bima before. There is no one uniform way of finding your mate that you can look back at the story of the Avos and say, oh, that's the proper way to find the shidduch. Because you look at the different ways that the Torah describes how our Avos and Imahos found each other, and they're all totally different. When it comes to Avraham and Sarah, the Torah does not tell us how they met. The Torah doesn't tell us that Terach or Mrs. Terach, Avraham's parents, arranged the shidduch between Avraham and Sarah. The Torah doesn't even tell us how they met. It just says, Vayikach Avram v'Nachor lahem nashim. That Avram and Nachor took wives for themselves. We know that Sarah was his cousin, so it was very traditional to marry a member of your family, but it doesn't say that this was an arranged marriage. It doesn't say that Terach took Sarah and gave him to Avraham. It says that Avraham, on his own initiative, took a wife for himself, just like his brother Nahor did. And that's all we know. We don't know which coffee shop they went to when they were dating. We don't know any of the details at all about how Avraham and Sarah courted each other. We also know from the story of Yaakov and his wives that it was not the conventional shidduch process, although Yaakov's parents, Yitzchak and Rivka, sent him off to go and find a wife from their mishpacha, which again is very, very conventional in the times of the Torah to marry a cousin. But it was Yaakov who seeks Rachel out. His parents are not involved actively in the shidduch process. They just tell him, go to our mishpacha and find a wife. And Yaakov falls in love with Rachel at the well, and we know that it didn't go exactly as Yaakov had planned. He had to first marry Leah, and then afterwards he can only marry Rachel because of Lavan's deception, which we'll learn about later on. But when it comes to Yitzchak, we find a totally different method of getting a wife for Yitzchak. Avram doesn't send Yitzchak on his own. Go find a wife. Go take a wife. Go to my family, you'll find a wife there. Yitzchak is the most passive of the Avos when it comes to seeking out a wife. Avram goes out and marries a wife. Yaakov goes out and finds a wife. Yitzchak stays at home and waits for the wife to come to him. Which is quite interesting. And I would almost suggest that a lot of it has to do with the way that his parents raised him. Because Avraham and Sarah, when you think about it, were the ultimate givers. They were all the ultimate Balei Chesed. So you can imagine that when it came to treating how they treated their son, they probably also treated him with that the very same amount of effusive giving. And it may have actually been a liability for Yitzchak, to be able to be brought up by parents who are ultimate givers. I mean, if Avraham is willing to run out to 3 strange men and to shecht the whole animal and to feed them the choicest parts of the animal, can you imagine when Yitzchak came home from school every day, what Avraham must have done for his little boychik? Come inside, I'll take off your shoes, I'll get you a snack. You must be so hungry after a long day out in the field or wherever you've been doing. And Yitzchak was this pampered young man for his entire lifetime. The fact that he was able to emerge as one of our avos, despite the fact that he was the object of so much giving from his parents, is quite remarkable. But he had to go through a transformative experience in order to be able to achieve that. As a matter of fact, the Zohar actually describes Yitzchak as being born with this disadvantage from the time that he was born. Let's take a look at the Medrash. First, the Pasuk tells us that when Eliezer comes to find a wife for Yitzchak, he meets Rivka, of course, at the well. We know the story, and he goes home with her, and he tells them Rivka's father and her brother all of the amazing coincidences that occurred at the well, which really is a sign that Hashem has been involved in the shidduch all along. And their response is, when they hear all of this, remarkable story, they say, "Vaya'an Lavanu v'Suel vayomeru," that Lavan and Besuel respond in unison, and they say, "May Hashem yatsa hadavar." The matter has emanated from God. Lo nuchal daber elecha ra'otav. We cannot say good or bad to you. There's clearly so many signs that this is bashert, that this is from Hashem. The Medrash tells us something very interesting. The Medrash says that if you look at the verb yatsa, that's not a normative verb for when you want to describe this. If you wanted to say this is an act of God or this is from God, you would say May Hashem haya hadavar or May Hashem hadavar. You don't even have to use a verb at all. Why do we have to say May Hashem yatsa hadavar? And the Medrash says, therefore, Mehechan yatsa. This is in source number 3 from the Medrash Rabbah. Where did it emanate from? Rabbi Hoshua bar Nechemia b'shem Rabbi Chanina bar Yitzchak Mehar HaMoriah yatsa. That it emanated out of Mount Moriah. Now, what happened at Mount Moriah? Akedas Yitzchak, the Akedah, which is in the last week's parsha. V'Rabbanan Amri Mehechan yatsa v'tihi isha leven adonecha ka'asher diber Hashem. Or usihi isha leven adonecha ka'asher diber Hashem. The rabbis say that it came from the statement of Lavan and Besul when they said, "The woman shall be for the son of your master, just as God has spoken." Now, this is a very cryptic medrash, and we have to try and make sense of it, try and understand what it means. If you take a look, the Or HaChaim says in a couple of places in his Torah commentary, he quotes the Zohar to describe the essential quality traits of Yitzchak. First, at the beginning of last week's parsha, the angel says to Avraham, "Shov ashuv elecha ka'es chaya, v'hine vein l'sara ishtecha." Remember that the angel says to Avraham, "I shall surely return to you this same time next year, and behold, there will be a son to Sarah, your wife." Those are his exact words. And the Or HaChaim HaKadosh is very exacting in the way that sentence is phrased. Shov ashuv, double language of I will return. Ka'es chaya, the same time next year. V'hine vein, and behold, there will be a son. L'sara ishtecha, not to you, the son will be for your wife Sarah. So let's see what the Or HaChaim says. He says, Tam kefel shov ashuv. Why does it have to say, I shall return to you, using the word shuv twice? Gam omro tevat v'hine. And also, why does it say, and behold, there will be a son? Like v'hine is right in front of you. Yechavem omar al derech omram zal. This is based on what our sages tell us, and he's really quoting the Zohar now. He's not quoting the Medrash. Kishenolad Yitzchak lo haya ro'ui loholid. When Yitzchak was born, he was incapable of having children. Why? Kiva misitra denukva. Because he came from the side of the feminine. He came from the feminine side, literally is what it means. Now, what does it mean to come from the sitra denukva? There was something effeminate about Yitzchak that prevented him, not necessarily in the, like, it's not like he wore, flamboyant clothes. It doesn't mean that he acted in an effeminate way, but it means that he had a certain feminine spiritual quality about him, which made him more of a receiver than a giver. Because, like we've spoken out many times before, male and female traits, the word male and female, when we relate to them sexually, mean one thing, but in the world of objects, like in engineering, a male plug versus a female plug, the male is placed into the female plug. It's the giver versus the receiver, is what male and female actually mean. Yitzchak could not reproduce and provide offspring to his wife because he was, the sitra denukva means that he was more of a recipient than a giver. He had that feminine quality about him. And therefore, uvama'aseh ha'akedah zacha l'nefesh ha'ra'ui laholid. It was only through the experience of Akedas Yitzchak that he was able to acquire the masculine trait of being able to reproduce and give child to another person. So the experience of the Akedah is what transformed Yitzchak from being effeminate to being masculine. And that's V'hu sheramaz b'mamar hamalach shov ashuv elecha ka'et chaya v'hinei vein l'sara. That's exactly what the pasuk is alluding to. Perush misitra dunukva v'dayek lomar v'hinei perush hamizdamein kodem hu geder zeh. That when you first encounter Yitzchak, v'hinei, here he is, you're going to encounter one kind of human being that's going to have this feminine quality to him. Ve'amar ashuv, but then that's only when I come back to you the first time. V'hinei, he's going to be a son to Sarah. He'll be Sarah's little boy. He'll be the mama's boy, who will be the recipient, who will have that feminine quality. Ve'amar ashuv, but then it says, I will come back a second time. Perush ha'am bet yashuv elav perush lebichinat Avraham shuhu alma de duchura. That when I come back to you a second time, there will be a second iteration of Yitzchak's birth. He'll first be born and he'll present himself in one way and with one persona, but then there'll come another time, another iteration of Yitzchak's life when he will present himself with the masculine persona of being Avraham's son, not just Sarah's son. V'zeh haya ba'akedah. And that's what happened at the time of Akedas Yitzchak. Dichsiv, and what do we see? What does the pasuk say ba'akedas Yitzchak? Vayikra elav malach Hashem min hashamayim, that an angel of God called out to Avraham. And guess what, says the Or HaChaim? You know who that angel was? The very same angel that gave Avraham the tiding in the first place, that he would have a son named Yitzchak. The Or HaChaim connects those two angels. The angel that came to Avraham and said, you're going to have a son, is the very same angel that stayed Avraham's hand from slaughtering his son, and was coming back to him and telling him, now you've got a new son. Your first son was a feminine child, and now your new son, he's been reborn at the time of the Akedah, and now he's a masculine child. Vehem bet pikidot, pikida rishon sheyeh ba'olam Yitzchak, bet shetiyeh lo nefesh hayoledet. So the first time he's born, he's just Yitzchak, the son of Sarah. The second time that he's born, he now has the capability of reproducing as a male. Now, what did the Akedah do? There are experiences that we go through in life which are transformative. So you know that a person may be very meek and shy and very passive, but they go through an experience where they're called to save someone from an impending train, and they have to throw off their jacket and jump down on the tracks and pull the person out and be heroic. And they never viewed themselves as a hero, but all of a sudden the circumstances of life happens that calls upon you to become a hero, and you completely transform. That's the experience that Yitzchak has in his life. He's transformed into this heroic figure of being able to say, you know what? I'm hereby ready to sacrifice myself for Hashem in a heroic fashion. If this is what my father tells me is my calling, then let's go for it. Through that heroic deed of Akedas Yitzchak, of Yitzchak's submission, of his giving himself up willingly, his life to the Ribono Shel Olam, he becomes the giver, no longer the perpetual recipient, and therefore he becomes the male. And that's how he changes from Alma de Nukva or Sitra de Nukva to Sitra de Duchra, as in the Zoharic terminology. The Or HaChaim says this later on at the end of Parshas Vayera. He says the very same thing. And he offers this transformation that Yitzchak undergoes as the reason why the Torah tells us in the very last paragraph of last week's Parsha why the Torah goes into a description of Rivka's birth. Why does the Torah have to tell us that Rivka was born right after Akedas Yitzchak? So he explains, that after the Akedah, Avram is informed to let him know that, you know what, you have a niece whose name is Rivka. He says the reason for this, as the Or HaChaim, ki ein lo kesher Leidat ha'amurim mitzad mashikadam, because at face value there seems to be no connection to Rivka's birth, to anything that happened at the Akedah. Zehu lo hodia shenolda Rivka bat zugo shel Yitzchak. It's to tell me that Rivka's birth takes place, the woman who would eventually marry Yitzchak. V'tam ad ata v'lo kodem, and the reason why it had to happen now after the Akedah and not before, kvar higdamnu ki haya misitra denukva, v'lo haya lo nukva ad achar ha'akedah shenit'abra bo nefesh hazachar, that Yitzchak was incapable of taking a mate who was female if he was still a female, in his spiritual essence, in his spiritual core. Therefore, he had to go through the transformation of becoming, of this gender transition, of going from female to male, in order to be able to have the female who was going to be his mate to be born. Because in order to have a recipient as your mate, you also can't be a recipient, you have to be the giver. There has to be a male and female connection. So if he's female and she's female, then there's no shidduch. He has to be the male and she has to be the female. Now, please don't get me wrong. There's constant giving and taking in every relationship. This is not to imply that a man is the giver and the woman is the taker in the relationship. Of course it's not that way. We're speaking about character traits, male and female character traits. Every human being is partially male and partially female. We're a mixture of both. And the only thing that makes a woman more female than a man are her physiological characteristics. But inside, in our kishkas, we're all male and female to varying degrees, in the sense of that what we're referring to right now, which is recipient versus giver. And therefore, therefore he says, and that's the reason why Vayugadli Avraham uvutel yeladet Rivka zehu ikar hasipur. That's the reason why this story appears over here, because only after Yitzchak is transformed from female to male is he capable. Now, this goes all to the story this goes back to the Medrash. Now we can understand our Medrash. What does it mean? Vayomeru me Hashem yatsa hadavar. What they were saying is, we have these two opinions. Mehar hamoriya yatsa. The transformation of Yitzchak took place at Mount Moriah. That's what they were remarking about. Is that they saw that all of these circumstances, not only Eliezer's encounter at the well, but also all of the details of Yitzchak's life that brought us to this point right now, all emerges from the event at the Akedah. Only after the Akedah was Yitzchak ready to marry Rivka. And therefore, the Medrash says, the Rabbanan Amri, and the Rabbanan say, Mehechan Yatsa, where did it emanate from? When they made a declaration, Usihi Isha Leven Adonecha Ka'asher Diber Hashem. They no longer called Yitzchak Ben Lisara Ishtecha, which is what the angel called Yitzchak. V'hinei vein Lisara Ishtecha. Sarah will have a son. He'll be the mama's boy. No longer is Yitzchak called mama's boy. Yitzchak is now called Ben Adonecha. Eliezer, you have a master. His name is Avram. And Rivka will be that boy's wife. Because no longer is he Sarah's son, he's Avraham's son. Because he's been transformed. Now, we would therefore be able to suggest that the reason why Yitzchak is the most passive in seeking a mate is because he still has that remnant of femininity to him, of being that passive receiver and not the person who's the go-getter. And that's the reason why he finds himself in this position where his father says, no, Yitzchak, you stay home. Our suggestion is perhaps, and perhaps this is, maybe it could be misapplied what we're suggesting, but it really is just a suggestion that has to be taken with nuance. Yitzchak, part of the reason why Yitzchak was a mama's boy was because his parents allowed him to be a mama's boy. They smothered him with love. And one of the liabilities that we have when we smother our children with love is that we don't allow them to become givers. The part of the challenge that we have as parents is to enable our children to grow up to become givers like us. And the truth is, as we mature, we transition from being recipients to givers, but we still have an obligation to find opportunities for our children to become givers, so that they don't become the passive recipients. And it's not just the question of shidduchim. It's like, it's not just, it doesn't just apply to, and I've had all different kinds of situations of parents calling me for shidduchim, where one mother was so involved in her daughter's shidduchim that she completely ruined the process for her, because she was so involved and so inquisitive about the boy that my conclusion was that this is going to be the mother-in-law from Gehenna. Yeah. And so you don't want to be so involved. But it's not just with shidduchim. It's in so many other areas as well. It's in the areas of, your child needs to enroll for a course, and there's an instinctive desire. Don't worry, Bubala, I'll take care of it for you. I'll figure out how to do it. There's an instinctive desire to be able to cook for your children and to provide them with everything that they need. But there are also times when you want your children to learn how to fend for themselves. So it becomes almost an obligation for a parent to go against her grain and to say, you know what? I've decided I'm not cooking tonight. What would you like to make for dinner? So there comes a time when a parent has an obligation to allow their child to become more masculine, while at the same time providing that security and the shelter and all of the protective elements. But yet you see that Yitzchak had to go through an Akedah to be transformed, and it may have been exactly because of the fact that Avram and Sarah were so much the Balei Chesed. By the time we get to Yaakov Avinu, Yaakov's parents are Yitzchak and Rivka, and you find that Yitzchak does not have that same chesed trait as his father Avraham did because of his upbringing. And you many times find this transitions generationally in families. Parents who were very giving and very smothering of their children, the children tend to rebel against that and they become more passive parents, precisely because they're not used to giving. And then the children flip-flop, and then everything keeps switching back generation after generation. The challenge, of course, is that we have to try and create balance for our children. Smother them with love, but at the same time give them enough breathing space to emerge as great givers so that they can do something wonderful with the world. Have a wonderful day.